Welcome again to the latest edition of Nick's Yemen Roundup, covering the dates 25 May to 1 June 2025. For those of you who are unfamiliar, my name is Nick Brumfield. I am an independent analyst focused on the Middle East, several countries in the Middle East, but most notably Yemen. This product is intended to be a weekly product that essentially provides a narration of the events that have gone on in and around Yemen or concerning Yemen for the last week, from a political perspective, a military perspective, and an economic humanitarian perspective. I've made a couple versions of these calls. We're kind of getting in the groove of things here. It seems that a Monday drop date does seem to be very helpful for people. If you have a particular preference for a day that you would like this dropped, I'm still kind of formulating the schedule for that. But yeah, it seems kind of the Sunday Monday time frame is going to be the one going forward. Before we get started, a little bit about me. So I am Nick Brumfield. I am a independent analyst. I have an MA in Arab Studies from Georgetown University and have been spent the last decade or so professionally analyzing, writing on, commenting on, giving presentations on Middle East politics, most notably as they relate to the conflict in Yemen. I'm regularly quoted in international media as it relates to Yemen. I have an experience in a lot of different sort of capacities as a researcher. I do everything from project management to data management, GIS capabilities, as well as kind of the more typical political risk and legal consulting. So all of this is just to say, if you are a party that is interested in that, whether you run an NGO who's interested in events in Yemen, a legal firm sort of consulting on cases as they relate to Yemen, or any other thing, please feel free to reach out to me at info.nickjbrumfield@gmail.com. That is kind of currently my business contact email. And I'm more than happy to talk with you about how I might be able to assist you. So with that, we can go ahead and get started with what people are actually here for, which is stuff on Yemen. Starting off with politics and governance issues as they relate to international affairs. A fair bit this week, actually. Last week was a bit quieter, but this week we did see a lot of engagement along a number of fronts, starting off as it relates to kind of the UN-backed peace process, or just kind of international efforts for peace process in Yemen. We did see UN Special Envoy Hans Grundberg travel around the region this week, and what some interpreted as a possible, a push to kind of restart the Yemen roadmap, or a version of the Yemen roadmap between the various warring parties in Yemen following the 6 May ceasefire between the Houthis and the U.S. government. So we did see him in Riyadh on 25 May, in which he met with a number of people, but most notably met with Yemeni government Foreign Minister Zindani, as well as the kind of two major foreign players in Yemen, Mohammed al-Jaber, the Saudi ambassador to Yemen, and Mohammed al-Zoubi, the UAE ambassador to Yemen. So during these, at least in the readout from this, he stressed the need to use the 6 May ceasefire as a jumping off point for a broader Yemen roadmap. For the last 18 months or so, the Yemen any peace process in Yemen has been stalled by the Houthis' engagement in international hostilities surrounding the Gaza war and the Israeli assault on Gaza. The parties did seem like they were ready to sign something in December of 2023, and then they didn't. This was probably due to international pressure on Saudi Arabia not to reward the Houthis for their attacks in the Red Sea and elsewhere. But since this ceasefire, since the U.S. has kind of said, okay, we're making a deal with the Houthis, perhaps that does provide an opening for Saudi Arabia and others to maybe pursue the peace process a bit more vigorously. Whether everyone in Yemen is happy about that, I'm not sure, but we'll see. We also did see on 28 May Grundberg follow up his visit in Riyadh to a visit to Muscat, where the Houthis maintain a significant diplomatic presence, despite actually recent U.S. pressure to get Oman to kick them out. So during that visit to Muscat, he met with the Omanis, the Houthi senior leaders, and senior Iranian officials. and again discussed translating the U.S. Houthi ceasefire into a wider peace movement. Elsewhere, we did see the UN weigh in amid the continued exchanges between the Houthis and Israel, in particular via various attacks from both sides on airports. So we did see the UN warn that this escalation is exacerbating a very fragile situation and condemn both Houthi attacks on Ben Gurion Airport in Israel and Israeli attacks on Sana'a International Airport in Yemen. And last but not least, we did see on 29 May the office director for the Office of the Special Envoy for the Secretary General of Yemen based in Aden, meet with members of the Southern National Dialogue Team, again, part of ongoing engagement from the UN Envoy's office with various parties kind of involved in the Yemen conflict. The Southern National Dialogue Team is kind of the STC-aligned body tasked with trying to bring together various currents within the Southern movement that aren't already in the STC in various regions to kind of, extend STC influence, perhaps. Moving on over to international affairs, kind of from the just general Yemeni government perspective, just because they're really the only ones that are publicly doing international affairs. The Houthis, as an internationally recognized terrorist group, or that's what the international community or several countries have called them, doesn't do as much of that. But we did see some interesting developments this week. On 26 May, we did see PLC Chairman Rashad Al-Limi receive the Deputy Secretary General of the European Union's External Action Service, Olaf Skog, in Riyadh. This was right before EU and delegation of EU ambassadors. They tend to travel around in a pack. Did a visit to Yemeni government-held areas around Aden and Lahej, where they met with several several Yemeni government officials, several ministers. Met with PLC member Tariq Saleh remotely, as well as the Minister of Defense and Minister of Planning and several other such figures. And we did see on 30 May, U.S. Charge d'Affaires Jonathan Paicha, or reports perhaps that U.S. Charge d'Affaires Jonathan Paicha is now in charge of the U.S. Embassy to Yemen, which is based in Riyadh since the war began, amid reports that U.S. Ambassador to Yemen Stephen Fagan has been temporarily reassigned to serve as an interim charge d'affaires or a kind of ambassador at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. So that new phase, just wanted to, whenever there's an update for that, we do like to highlight that. Paicha has been at the U.S. Embassy in Yemen for a while now, so he is a known figure. But he's now the one that people are going to be seeing in these photos, such as this one of his meeting with Yemeni government chief of staff Saghir bin Aziz in Riyadh on 29 May. But really, the big splashy international affairs story this week concerned this very photo-op-y visit by Presidential Leadership Council Chairman Rashad Al-Limi, who is effectively recognized as the head of state of Yemen, to Moscow to visit with several Russian officials, including Russian President Vladimir Putin. So this is something of a big deal in the sense that we've seen Russia engaging with various Yemeni parties over the years. For up until, I would say, the Gaza crisis, it had maintained, I'd say, an equidistant stance between all of the various parties. They talked to the Houthis, they talked to the Yemeni government, they officially supported the Yemeni government. They talked to the STC, they talked to Tariq Saleh, but we have not seen, first, over the course of the last year or so, we've seen the Russians get a little bit closer to the Houthis with reports that maybe that they're providing them weapons or planning to provide them weapons, intelligence, that kind of thing. So one, this is them inviting the Yemeni government, which is the Houthis' enemy, to Russia, which is a kind of a big deal. And second, this is the highest level visit from a Yemeni government official to Yemen I can remember. I don't remember President Hadi doing this before. Alimi may have done it before, but this is pretty high up. So that this occurred. So Alimi arrived in Moscow on 27 May, and he did personally meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. There's the shot that everyone was sort of waiting for with regards to that, as well as several other senior Russian officials as they relate to foreign policy and the Middle East file at a luncheon. It is worth noting that one of the undercurrents of this one, or one of the interesting undercurrents of this um, visit concerned Leamy's desire to acquire air defenses. So on 30, while he was sort of doing the tour, he gave an interview with Russia Today in which he stresses the Yemeni government's need for air defenses. This is because the Houthis, as demonstrated by their attacks on Israel and elsewhere, really do kind of have air superiority in Yemen, or whatever counts as air superiority in Yemen. They're able to strike wherever they want. They're most importantly, perhaps, able to strike any ships attempting to offload, to take on oil from Yemeni government oil terminals. And this has been a major fiscal issue for the Yemeni government, which has not been able to export oil for the last 3 years or so. And so, yeah, so he was in there saying we need air defenses. Maybe the Russians will be able to support us. It's worth noting, in his kind of readout from his meeting with Putin, he did in fact stress the effects of the Houthi attacks on oil facilities. So that, it's something to look out for. We also did see Putin say that Russia is to reopen its embassy in Yemen, although I don't think he stated exactly where. And this is something the Russians have been saying that they're going to be doing for a fairly long time now. Yeah, we're working on reopening the Yemen embassy. So we'll see if anything comes of that. But yeah, moving on over to politics and governance from the Yemeni government perspective, we did see a continuation of the saga that we've been tracking for the last several weeks, with continued protests in Aden, in particular women's protests in Aden, amid deteriorating service conditions, both in terms of electricity and water, there's also an ongoing water crisis in Yemeni government-controlled Taz that is getting really, really bad. The women's protests, so there were 2 of them earlier in May, and then they got banned actually by the local kind of STC-aligned Aden Security Authority, but they did stop them from doing one. But women are still coming out; they're still protesting. This is causing a lot of consternation for the ROYG because women, they're seen as a non threatening, perhaps, demographic group. You can't attack them in the same way that you could attack men in sort of Yemeni politics. So the fact that we're seeing a consistent and constant mobilization from this group in Yemen is it's causing trouble for the ROYG in terms of its stability, that kind of thing. We did see on 1 June pro-Houthi media outlets report that an activist leading these protests, Sabrine Jalal, had been summoned by Aden security over them. And so obviously a lot of security pressure to try to prevent these from occurring. We did see amid this on 1 June, Presidential Leadership Council Chairman Alimi, fresh off his visit to Russia, as well as newly appointed Prime Minister Salim bin Barak, returned to Aden from Riyadh. This is bin Barak's first time back in Aden since his appointment as Prime Minister in 3 May. He had previously been the Finance Minister, and he's still kind of on that portfolio until they get his replacement. But this is notable because bin Barak had previously issued, kind of, not him directly, but sources in the Yemeni government issued it on state media, stated that bin Barak was not going to return to Aden until he is able to negotiate or arrange for significant support to resolve a number of pressing issues, including the deterioration of the Yemeni rial, including the electricity issue, and salaries. We haven't necessarily seen a breakthrough with regards to that. That statement made me think that he was essentially in Riyadh negotiating for the release of another Saudi deposit. The Yemeni government, due to the Houthi blockade on oil exports, is highly dependent on the regular injection of hundreds of millions of dollars from Saudi Arabia. The fact that he's coming back to Aden now from Riyadh without that necessarily being stated, they did announce, Central Bank of Yemen and Aden did announce that they were releasing salaries from April to May. But we didn't really get a big breakthrough, which is what I think he was waiting for. So perhaps those negotiations are ongoing. Perhaps the Saudis are waiting a little bit until either for leverage for something within the ROYG, which is something they do regularly, or perhaps they're waiting for a kind of breakthrough on the peace process with the Houthis and don't want to give up their $250 million without, before that happens. We did see Bin Barak give a speech following his return to Aden on 1 June and stated that the government is still dedicated to solving economic issues and highlighted the need for international support. Moving on over to politics and governance from the Houthi movement perspective, this past week, mostly a lot of repression. I will say, obviously, you did have your weekly sermon by Abdul Malik al-Houthi. Wasn't terribly interesting, if you ask me. But several notable incidents reported in Houthi-held areas. On 25 May, we did see a Houthi court sentence Adnan al-Harazi, the CEO of Prodigy Systems, a humanitarian monitoring and evaluation company that the Houthis seized, I think, way back in 2023 at this point. They sentenced him a Houthi court sentenced him to 15 years imprisonment. This is actually an improvement for Harazi, who was previously under a death sentence that had been voided by, I believe, another court. And then the Houthi court, kind of on appeal or something, upheld the 15-year sentence, but not the death penalty. So he is no longer in danger of being killed and executed by the Houthis, which was a very big concern. Adnan al-Harazi, in part due to his connection with the international community, international humanitarian community, was a cause célèbre for many Yemeni human rights activists and international as well. So he is still, imprisoned on charges, I think, basically espionage, although the Houthis have not really produced all that much evidence for that. And his trial was characterized by significant irregularities. And yeah, just the Houthis kind of basically what people think is that the Houthis wanted to seize Prodigy Systems because for the infrastructure it had with regards to monitoring and evaluation and the humanitarian sector. We did see on 25 May as well, Houthi forces blow up the house. This is from an anti-Houthi source, so I do want to preface that, but it does seem fairly credible that the Houthi forces blew up a house of a Daham tribal sheikh in Jawf Governorate, which is in the north along the border between, near the border with Saudi Arabia, killing his wife and children were inside, according to these reports. This is something the Houthis do relatively frequently. One of the ways that they show that they have dominance and have shown that they have dominance for the last, since they started in the Sada wars in the early 2000s, is they find a tribal sheikh and they take his house and they blow it up. Most often it doesn't have his wife and children inside, but this is seen as a grievous kind of crime and definitely has drawn a lot of outrage from segments of Yemeni society. We also did see on 27 May, Houthi authorities reportedly forbid the filming, television filming, or content creation, or even interviews conducted in Sana'a without a license. This is perhaps related to security concerns as it relates to international bombing campaign, that kind of thing. But again, and then we did see as well on 31 May reports that Houthi forces stormed the house of a popular resistance leader who's since left and is not in Houthi-held areas in Mahwit Governorate, and they confiscated his property. Again, pretty par for the course for Houthi forces. Moving on over to military and security, kind of from the front lines, really the main story this week concerned Dale Governorate and the Aden Sana'a road running through Damt in Dale Governorate. We did see on 30 May, STC and line forces repel a Houthi attack on Bab Ghalak, but really the main story is that finally, after many years of closure and lobbying and everything, this very important road from Aden to Sana'a through Dale Governorate has been reopened by both Houthi and Yemeni government / STC forces near the Marays front. We did see. One second there. There we go. We did see this message quite a bit particularly from the STC side in recent weeks as a humanitarian gesture. So that did occur. We also did see reports that the STC-aligned forces had actually assumed control of Yemeni government positions on the Marays front, kind of along this road, potentially so that they can levy taxes on goods passing through it. This is notable. We've seen the reopening of a number of important roads linking Houthi and Yemeni government-held areas over the course of the past year. In light of everything that's going on with regards to the Houthi-held ports in Hodeidah, it is very possible, perhaps, that this is, them restructuring their economy to perhaps bring in more goods from Aden. Ever since Hodeidah port was essentially fully reopened in early 2023, we'd seen essentially them cut off most or all imports from Aden and say, if you want to bring anything into our areas, you have to take them in through Hodeidah. With all the complications around Hodeidah, it is possible that they are restructuring that. It's also possible this is part of a gesture or an attempt between the Saudi-led coalition and the Houthis to continue the roadmap, which calls for the reopening of various roads. The reopening of this road, and so this is kind of the areas of control. So you see, sort of the Houthis are there, and then the STCs there. This did result in calls in neighboring Abiyan governorate to reopen the Thara road, which is another important road linking primarily STC-controlled areas of Abiyan with Houthi-controlled Bayda. But we did see the STC push back on that because they said that it's a very different kind of beast to open Thara and would require a lot of military coordination and that kind of thing. In particular, because the Thara's front is characterized by this essentially massive, where the Houthis are elevated on these giant mountains, like way above the anti-Houthi forces. So it's perhaps a different beast there. Let's see there. Okay, moving on over to obviously what everyone's been following, the Houthi-Israel conflict, which continued apace this past week. Throughout the week, we did see the Houthis claim, and ostensibly they were confirmed by the fact that Israel claimed to intercept them, ballistic missile attacks, almost, I believe, entirely on Ben Gurion Airport in Israel. So the Houthis have said that they're enacting an air blockade on Israel, and so that they're going to do that. They've also recently stated that they're going to enact a blockade on Haifa port, which we haven't seen anything with regards to that, but companies are very antsy and asking about, what does that mean for shipments into Haifa port in Israel. So we did see multiple attacks throughout the week that did actually result in at least temporary suspensions of air operations at Ben Gurion Airport. Additionally, I believe there was also a big soccer match in Israel that had to be temporarily suspended as a result of these attacks. So they are having concrete effects on Israeli society, which is, I guess, what the Houthis are aiming for. In response to this, we did see on 28 May, kind of call it the Battle of the Airports, if you will. On 28 May, an Israeli airstrike destroyed the last of the 4 planes that the Houthis had held at Sana'a Airport during the Hajj season. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the humanitarian economic section, but this didn't seem to deter the Houthis. They threatened Israel with a quote-unquote hot summer after the airport attack, and we are seeing them continue their attacks. Or even on 1 June, the Houthis did warn foreign investors in Israel of the potential consequences of remaining there. So they are keeping it. If anyone's familiar with how the Houthis prosecuted their air campaign against Saudi Arabia, this is very familiar. They will just keep on keeping on. They'll take whatever hits you can get them, and even if they're not launching anything, they'll claim they're launching stuff, and then people will have to worry if they're launching stuff. So it is that's their playbook. Moving on over to maritime security in Yemen, not too much to report with regards to Houthi or international attacks on shipping. We did see on 26 May Somali pirates reportedly abduct Yemeni fishermen off Ras Bana in Hadramaut, ostensibly for a $50,000 ransom. We do see that from time to time. We did see on 29 May Yemeni government Coast Guard head Major General Khalid Al-Kamili, or commonly, met with the EU ambassadors during their visit to Aden. EU and other international actors, UK, even the US, have been very into supporting the Yemeni Coast Guard, which is primarily based It's based on a number of areas, but the big one that we always see is on the southwest coast, kind of in areas controlled by Tarek Saleh. They're big into supporting that as a means to interdict not just Houthi weapon shipments, but also migration, I think, is also playing a part in that. On 29 May, we did see the Combined Maritime Forces, which is an international maritime coalition, trying to stop smuggling, piracy, and stuff in the Gulf of Aden, and I don't believe they technically have. Yeah, I think they have a Red Sea component now. They reported that on 22 May, they seized $36 million of heroin and other drugs in the North Arabian Sea. And last but not least, perhaps the most flashy, bit tabloidy, if you will, on 31 May, we did see the Houthis claim that the HMS Prince of Wales, which is a UK Royal Navy warship, had requested permission to transit the Red Sea from the Houthis without being fired upon. So the UK has been a major participant in the US-led air campaign against the Houthis. And the Houthis said that they granted it on the condition that the HMS Prince of Wales wasn't going to be conducting any military activity against Yemen or, I believe, Gaza as well. And so it did transit, I believe. And so, take that as a note that maybe the Houthis at least are trying to dial down tensions in the Red Sea. Moving on over to humanitarian and economic issues from the humanitarian affairs perspective. We did see on 26 May, UN Resident Coordinator Julian Harnais meet with Yemeni Government Foreign Minister Zindani in Riyadh. That's our picture on the right. We did see on 30 May, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch both call on, I believe as well as several other organizations, call on the Houthis to release international aid workers that they abducted in June of 2024. So they've been abducted for basically a year now. This includes, dozens of workers for international aid organizations, foreign embassies, foreign companies. But the ones that got the most attention were 17 UN aid workers that working directly for the UN who the Houthis abducted. Since then, we've seen, partially because of that, partially because Trump just said we're going to cut US aid, but just a massive decrease in humanitarian aid funding in Yemen. And this is having really noticeable effects now. Before, other times you could say, is this really having an effect? This is having real humanitarian effects in Yemen. So in terms of food security, we did see in April 2025, both the Yemeni government and Houthi-held areas report 24%, report inadequate food consumption that was 24% and 29% above levels from April 2024, so year over year. So this is that we are seeing a noticeable increase in inadequate food consumption, primarily driven, I think, by the reduction in humanitarian funding, but also we did see some interesting developments with regards to food imports through Houthi ports between January and April, primarily, I would say, as a result of the international bombing campaigns from both the US and Israel that have significantly damaged those ports. We did see on 28 May, and this could be related to the politics of the ports that I was talking about earlier. On 28 May, we did see the World Food Program announce a halt to its moderate to acute malnutrition management program in Houthi areas by the end of 2025 due to a depletion of supplies. This could possibly be due to reduction in funding, unable to fund it. The UN humanitarian needs and response plan it's something like 10% funded, and we're already halfway through the year. It could possibly also have to do with the politics of the Houthis restricting food imports to ports they control, so they can get more kind of money from them, and the fact that those are mostly kind of being taken offline or significantly damaged, and they maybe can't bring it in through the south, although that's unconfirmed. But yeah, so we are seeing noticeable food security issues increasing pretty dramatically across Yemen. Moving on over to infrastructure, again, sort of talking about those ports between January and April 2025, fuel through Houthi-held ports, which, for the last several years since they reopened, had been kind of increasing pretty dramatically. I was down 13% year over year for the period between January and April. ROYG ports are up, but they're still down 15. Over the course of those months, we did see the Yemeni government increase, or Aden and Mokala are the two ports that the Yemeni government controls, increasingly import fuel, but it was still down 15%, even from the relatively low amounts they were importing in early 2024. We'll see. According to reports, Yemen has food stocks in the context of the airstrikes on Houthi-held ports on the west coast. Yemen has food stocks for 2 to 3 months, I believe, and fuel stocks for the foreseeable future. There were reports that the Yemeni government, perhaps, anticipating these airstrikes on Houthi-held ports and also international sanctions against fuel imports into Houthi-held areas. There were reports on 28 May that the Yemeni government was planning to raise the customs dollar, which is used in the calculation of import tariffs in areas through their ports, from $750 to $1,500. This raised some protests from Aden port workers who said it would cause, some significant humanitarian suffering. But the Yemeni government is also cash strapped, and I imagine they're looking for whatever they can get in terms of raising funds and in the context of all the issues that's going. The last time they tried this was right before the Houthis reopened Hodeidah port, and then the Houthis were able to essentially, force everybody to go through Hodeidah anyway, so that it didn't really raise that much revenue, I don't think. But we did see on 29 May Lloyd's list report that traceable port calls at Hodeidah are the lowest they've been in a year, and there have been no arrivals at Salif, which is the grain port, in May 2025, amidst all of these airstrikes that we've seen in recent weeks against them. So after about a year of the Houthis seeming to be able to weather the strikes against the ports since Israel first did them in July of 2024, we may be seeing the shift in the political economic shift from Hodeidah to Aden that some people have been discussing for a while now. But also don't count the Houthis out. They've been very inventive and imaginative and innovative in getting those ports back online. But in either way, it's putting significant humanitarian pressure on things. In terms of air infrastructure, of course, we did see on 28 May those Israeli strikes destroy the last remaining Yemeni Airways plane held at Sana'a International Airport amid its use ferrying passengers from Sana'a to Jeddah for the Hajj. It had gone to Jeddah and then went to Amman and then was brought back to Sana'a, reportedly, according to Presidential Leadership Council Chairman Rashad al-Alimi, because the Houthis threatened to bomb other airports if the plane was not returned to Sana'a. But the Houthis disputed this. I've seen some reports state that this was, quote unquote, the last Yemeni Airlines plane or Airways plane controlled by Yemeni, citing Houthi-aligned officials. This is not the last Yemeni Airlines plane. So back during Hajj 2024, the Houthis had they took the opportunity that their multiple airplanes had been, 4 airplanes were operating at Sana'a to try to get people moving through, and essentially seized 4 aircraft from Yemeni and said, these are ours now, we're not going to let them leave. I'm not sure to the extent that this last aircraft was being used to service the Sana'a to Amman route, but essentially they held 4 of those aircraft hostage, more or less, an ongoing dispute with the Yemeni government. So Israel, in its previous airstrike in early May, destroyed 3 of these. This last one was at Amman at the time that strike took place, which indicates that it was probably being used to service the Amman route. And then it was brought back, and then they just destroyed this last one. Yemeni does have other planes. Yemeni services other airports in Yemen. They service Aden. They service Sayoun. Increasingly, they're getting other airports online. So there are other planes, but this may have been the one that they were using to service the Sana'a to Amman route, which remains the kind of one international flight out of Yemen, or out of Houthi-held areas of Yemen. which was considered a major humanitarian win. Israel, when it attacked it, stated that the Houthis used it to ferry terrorists to and from Yemen. It's entirely plausible to me, and in fact, probable that the Houthis, based on what we've seen, that the Houthis had been using this airline, not like, moving weapons and stuff on it, but just like sending people from Sana'a to Amman, and then from Amman to perhaps other areas in the Middle East. And even back. So yeah, so it's very much, possible, and even probable that they were using for this. But this was also just kind of a commercial flight. So again, in much the same way that both the U.S. and Israel have said, the Houthis are using Hodeidah port for terrorism purposes. It's effectively, they're just using an oil port that is sort of importing fuel, but they get the revenues from that, and so they're saying that that's a terrorist weapon. In the same way that they were saying, oh yeah, this plane was a terrorist weapon. I guess I'll leave that to you whether that's a valid interpretation. I'm a little suspect on that, but it is expected to cause. The Houthis have temporarily suspended operations at Sana'a. We are seeing, that the Amman to Sana'a flight seemingly suspended for the time being, which isn't great. And it also caused a brief scuffle or dispute between the Houthi-aligned Sana'a office of Yemenia and other offices in Yemeni government-held areas after those other offices refused to honor or refund the tickets for those who bought their tickets from Sana'a for I believe, the Hajj flight. And yeah, so that's Sana'a saying there's no reason you guys shouldn't do that, but the Yemeni government offices are saying, oh yeah, you wouldn't let anybody buy tickets from us. You would only allow them to buy them from Sana'a. And so yeah, it's a revenue thing again. Last but not least, in terms of energy infrastructure, we did see on 25 May, I would say, an interesting and perhaps innovative way of dealing with a couple issues that he's been facing. Yemeni government Prime Minister Salim bin Barak ordered the Yemeni government oil ministry to use oil from Shabwa Block S2, which has been facing a crisis of its own with the Austrian oil company OMV, which has been one of the longest foreign oil operators in Yemen, stating that it was going to completely exit the block because they're not able to export oil from Yemen because of the Houthi blockade. They're not making any money. They're having to continue to pay employees. So they're saying, okay, we're done here. So they said that they were going to exit on 31 May. And so just a little bit before that, we did see bin Barak order the oil ministry to kind of take over Block S2 directly and manage it, which isn't something we see very often. Petromasila is a state-owned oil company. Safar is a state-owned oil company, but we haven't seen the oil ministry itself seemingly manage stuff, so we'll see how that goes. But he ordered the oil ministry to use oil from this to provision fuel, I believe in the form of 4 oil tankers a day, to the Petromasila plant in Aden, which is one of the major fuel plant in Aden. There are other ones, but this alone comprises roughly 30% of electricity generation in Aden, amid all of these blackouts that are causing all of these protests in Aden. So he's seemingly trying to, use 2 bad situations to resolve each other. But we'll see how that goes. We did see bureaucratic infighting with YICOM, or the Yemeni Investment Company for Oil and Minerals, which is kind of a state-owned enterprise that has interest in northern Shabwa. Dispute how the oil ministry was going about moving stuff around. They wanted to, the oil ministry was going to move it in trucks, but they said that they need to use the pipeline that is in Shabwa. So bureaucratic infighting as always. So we'll see how successful that is. But it doesn't seem necessarily that they solved it yet, because as of 1 June, a private company in Aden was giving the Yemeni government 5,000 tons of diesel as a loan amid ongoing electricity generation issues. So it never ends, unfortunately. But thank you so much for listening to me ramble on here. I very much appreciate any questions, comments, or concerns that you put in the comments under the video. Also, please remember to like and subscribe if you like this content. Very much appreciate the positive feedback, and it does help, get the word out about it. And last but not least, if you like what you see, if you like, sort of what I can do as a researcher, Please feel free to reach out again at info.nickjbrumfield@gmail.com for any work requests. So thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you next week.